Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Well, he's here, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Bruce Turkel. Welcome to the Selling Show.
Thank you, David.
So it is so great to have you. You are just a multifaceted, multi-talented dude. Tell us a little bit about the backstory that brought you to the work that you're doing today and some of the fun pit stops along the way.
Sure. I went to design school. I graduated with a design degree. And so, of course, I went into the design business. And at some point, it dawned on me that as well as I could design something, it could always be designed another way. There was always another choice, another option, another way. And a lot of times, I had no control over that. It could have been budgets. It could have been client constraints. It could have been technical constraints, whatever. But what I really enjoyed was the advertising side of it, where you actually had to use your design skills to make something happen. It wasn't just to create a beautiful device or a beautiful ad or whatever, but it was to make something happen. And did that for a while. After college, I worked in New York. I moved back to Miami, where I live. And I worked at a couple agencies. And I thought at some point, you know what? I'm doing all the work here. I could run this business. So I started my own agency. My father called it the confidence of ignorance. He was absolutely right. I didn't know what I didn't know. And over time, we did very well and we grew and expanded. And at the turn of the century, Y2K, it dawned on me that what I thought was going to matter more and more than advertising, was branding. No one talked about branding back then. Everyone knows what it is now, but no one talked about it then. But it was, how do you take a product, a service, a person, a company, a destination, whatever, and how do you sell its intrinsic itness? What makes it different than its competition? And it's no longer function. All products do the same thing. All cars are good. All cameras are good because of computers, because of globalization, because of industrialization, all these different factors. What makes things different is the brand. So I moved our firm. We became what I call a brand management firm. And I started writing books on branding and got rather known in that world. And I did all that. And speaking at conferences and working with people individually sort of became the way I would attract business to the branding firm. And then in 2016, I sold the business. We had an office in Miami and we had offices throughout Latin America. And I sold the business and I tried to decide what I was going to do next. I still loved the work. I just didn't love all the things that were around it. I also had to figure out what to do next in my life. And so, again, being a marketing guy, I did market research. And I went and I spoke to almost 50 people who had successfully pivoted their lives, some for good reasons. They made a bunch of money or they had a great opportunity, some for bad reasons. They got divorced. There was a death in the family. They were diagnosed with an illness. They went bankrupt, whatever it was. But I talked to them and I asked them what they did, how they do it. Some of the people did things that I thought, oh my goodness, David, I would absolutely do that. Other people did stuff that I thought, oh my goodness, David, I wouldn't do that no matter what. But what I realized was both of those were important learning opportunities, what I would do, what I wouldn't do. And so I wrote a new book about that concept and started helping people and companies with these pivots. I didn't know that we were going to go into a worldwide pandemic that was going to cause everybody to pivot. I would like to say it was particularly good timing. Every cloud has a silver lining, except so many bad things happen that I don't look at it that way. Not for me, but in general, that I don't look at it that way. But what I realized was everyone all of a sudden had that, oh crap moment, like, oh crap, what do I do now? And there I was, just in the perfect position to help people figure it out.
So let me go back to when you were your 25 plus year advertising career, because obviously you grew a beautiful professional speaking business alongside that. A lot of folks that come on the show, they're like, yeah, I used to work at a big consulting firm and I spoke hundreds of times and I never thought of getting paid. And then I left doing that and I realized, oh, there's professional speaking. Obviously, that's probably not your situation. When did you first realize, hey, I'm speaking at these conferences, advertising, creative, graphic design, all these different conferences that are in the creative and advertising world. And you realize, wait a second, she's getting paid. He's getting paid. Just because I run an agency, why am I not getting paid? When did you make that transition from, CEO who speaks to paid professional speaker who also runs a brand management firm?
So I love that question. It's funny, we did not talk about this up front, but that is exactly my story. I had written that there was this design magazine that did a business annual, and they would feature certain design firms in this business annual. And so I figured, I have a sort of theory that if you want someone else to do something, write a testimonial for you, make a recommendation for you, make a referral for you, you do what I call the heavy lifting. I don't call you up and go, hey, David, would you call so-and-so? But I say, hey, David, I'd like to speak to so-and-so. Here's what I'd like to tell them. Would you mind sending them this note? I've done the heavy lifting. I wrote the note for you. Or, hey, would you put a testimonial on social media or whatever? I don't say that. I say, here's 5 testimonials. Does one of these make sense? Would you do the heavy lifting? So I want to get in this magazine. And instead of saying, hey, look at me, you ought to put me in your magazine, I wrote the article and I sent it to them. And they called and they sent a reporter who basically rewrote the article. And to be fair, my article was better, but irrelevant. My goal was to get into the magazine. But I talked about something that happened my second year in business where we got a new client. They paid us very well. We did a lot of work for them. And then we had to deliver all these print materials and all this other stuff. And we laid out a lot of money because they said, oh, yeah, we'll pay. But I got screwed out of a lot of money. It was a lot of money at the time. It's a lot of money now, but comparatively, it was devastating. And what's worse, a lot of it was not for me. It was vendor money. Printers on credit, typesetters on credit, photographers on credit. So I went to all those people and I told them what happened. I said, look, I got screwed. I know I still owe you the money, but I don't have it in cash. What can we do? And there were 5 specific vendors. One of them said, listen, just pay me my cost. You don't have to pay the full amount. One said, I respect that, you came to me with that. You can pay me over time, pay me X amount a month. One said, listen, will you give me more work in the future, but always pay me up front? Yes. Each one came up with, they were very nice, except one. One guy took me to court. And I brought those other 4 people as my character witnesses. And I said, look, he's not the only one I owed money to. I owed money to these 4 vendors. And they each got up and said, Bruce came to us. He told us the problem. We came up with a plan and we worked it out. And the judge turned to this guy and said, did he come to you? Yes, he did. Did he offer you a plan? Yes, he did. But I wouldn't take it anyways. So I wrote this whole thing. Here's what happened to me. So the publisher calls me and he goes, everyone writes these articles about how brilliant they are. In the interviews, talk about how brilliant they are. You basically wrote what a schmuck you were. And I said, well, I think it's important that people who do what I do learn this. We go to art school. I did go to business school, but most designers do not. So anyways, I wrote it. They put the article and then they called me and said, we do this annual design conference. Would you like to come tell that story? Yes, I would. I think it was in Chicago. They paid me $500 honorarium and an air ticket for myself and my wife. So we went to Chicago. I had a great time doing it. The next year they said, hey, we're doing it in San Francisco. Would you like to come? Yes, I would. 2 tickets. I got to go to the event. I got a hotel room and $500. Then Boston, 2 tickets, hotel, $500. And then Philadelphia, $500. The 5th or 6th year, the keynote speaker was a big design idol of mine. So I said to the meeting planner, who I knew really well, because I'd now gone there 5 years in a row, hey, could you arrange for me to have dinner? At the dinner, could I sit next to him? She said, sure. So I'm chatting with him. Gordon McKenzie is his name. And he was the creative director of Hallmark. And he wrote the book, an amazing book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball. Great book. So, and I had read the book and he signed it and we're having this chat. So I didn't know, David, that in the speaking business, it's bad form to ask people what they're being paid, right? You'd never do that at a National Speakers Association meeting. Well, some people would, but you're not supposed to. But I didn't know that. So I say to him, so what do you do now? And he says, well, I mostly do this. I travel around the country. I speak at conferences. I attract employees. I look for opportunities. That's what I do, which is what I was doing for the agency. I said, well, what do they pay you to do that? Figuring I'm getting $500. So he must get $1,000, right? And yeah, you're laughing. You know what's coming. He looks at me and he says, 20 grand, I think. At which point I kind of had the neon loser sign on my forehead, like, So the next day I was doing a workshop and there was a woman there doing a workshop. I had met her. Her name is Kari Anderson. She lives in Marin. And I'm like a little kid. I mean, I'm in my late 30s, but I'm like a little kid. Hey, Kari, guess what? Guess what? Guess what they're paying Gordon to speak here? And she goes, I don't know, 20, 25 grand. I mean, they're paying me 12.5. Why? What are they paying you, Bruce? The next day, I called the National Speakers Association. I went to a meeting in Atlanta and I learned about the business. And so that's how it happened. It happened because I was an idiot.
I love that story. Well, first of all, when Gordon says 20 grand, I think, like, he doesn't even know. He doesn't even care. It's like, I always get 20 something.
Right. It could have been 25. It could have been 28.
It could be somewhere in that range.
Right. Yeah. To him, it was like, well, yeah. And then to Kari, it was also, well, yeah, I get 12.5 for doing a workshop. Right. You must be getting that, right?
We interrupt this interview with an important announcement. If you're committed to better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees, get over to doitselling.com right now and grab a copy of my new book. That's the deal, kids. Grab a copy of the new book and then get all the bonuses, companion tools, trainings, and downloads at doitselling.com. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. Buy the book, get the bonuses. That's how it works. I'll see you over there.
We'll talk about book one as an entree into your latest and greatest book, which is That All There Is? But your prior book is all about them, which to most salespeople, most consultants, most professional services sellers, this is a news flash. This is a big update, people. Guess what? It's not about you and what you're selling and what you're doing. So as obvious as this is to folks like you and me, it is totally not obvious to so many people out there in the world of marketing and sales and professional services. Talk about the impetus to create this book. And then I'd love to dig into some of the just some of the chapter titles, because they're very hooky and they're very intriguing.
Sure, happy to. So this was actually my fourth or fifth book, all about them. The one I had written before, you can actually see it behind my head there, Building Brand Value.
Yeah.
I wrote that one specifically to win new business. Here's what I figured out. You've heard the saying, if you control the language, you control the activity. And the story, and I know it's apocryphal, but it's a great story, was about the Great Wall of China. That, borders are designed for two things: fences, borders, walls, whatever. They keep people out, attackers, people who would want what you have, right? They protect, but they also keep people in. And this could be real walls, or it could be metaphorical walls. It could be, the barriers you think control your life. Keep people out, keep activities out, but they also keep things in. So the story is that in China at the time, there was no word for freedom. Nobody had a way to say it. Therefore, the serfs who were taken advantage of had no way to organize because they couldn't discuss the concept of we could be free. And then a poet was sitting in the shade of the wall and sees a bird fly over the wall. And the poet writes a story about bird flying over the wall. What does the bird see outside the wall? What does it get to do? What happens out there? Is the sky bluer? Is the water clearer? Or all those things. Bird flying over the wall, and the pictograph, the Chinese pictograph for that, became the symbol of freedom. And because they had a word now, they had language, bird flying over the wall, they were able to organize and revolt and get what they deserved. Well, I realized that when we were pitching new business in the agency, our clients, for the most part, did not understand what it was we did. I mean, the CMO, the chief marketing officer, might, the advertising director might, but the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the board, all the people who made the decision. And I did a lot of work in communities. So often you'd have city commissioners or county commissioners or state Congress people making the decision. And to be fair, they don't know anything about what we were doing. They'd make the decision. So I thought, what if I write a manual on how you do it, but I use my own language? And so I would not do a presentation about, look at us, look how great we are, look how wonderful we are. But instead, I would do a presentation on, here's how you build a brand. Here are the 7 steps that are required to build a brand. And that's the book, Building Brand Value, 7 simple steps to profitable communications. Because what would happen was, if the people who were making the decision would use my words, we'd win the business. Because none of the other agencies that were pitching against us would use our words. So if I said, you have to reach out to all 5 senses, one of the people would say to someone else, hey, that other agency, I like that campaign, but it doesn't I can't taste it, touch it, or smell it. Oh, then it won't work. Boom, we'd win the business. That was the impetus. It worked really well. I didn't even worry about selling books, although it was nice to do that, but that was not why I wrote the book. Well, the 7 points of the book, the first one was all about them. My publisher wanted me to ultimately write 7 books about these different points. So all about them became the next book. And to your point, it's something that is both as a marketer and as a speaker, and in a lot of ways you could say an entertainer, because that's what we do when we're up on stage, we understand that the people in the audience are looking for something. They're looking to be educated. They're looking to be entertained. Ultimately, they're looking to be enlightened. What they're also looking for is that they're not going to be bored for the next amount of time that you're going to be on the stage. And the way you do that is by making your presentation all about them. It's also the way the best brands work. And I did research into the best brands, the brands that you love, that you care about. And, it could be whatever you like, Apple, Porsche, Starbucks, whatever. But if you look at them, you realize they sell an enhanced version of you, not of themselves. They make their brands all about them. So in a quick overview, that's where it came from.
Tremendous. I want to ask you about building brand value. How did you get that book into the hands of the CEOs or the senior executives that you wanted to have hire you?
Man, you asked the best questions. I feel like I briefed you on all this ahead of time, but you're really very insightful. It's quite simple. They'd say, instead of sending a proposal or a brochure, you send a book. And they'll say, oh, what do you know about building brands? This is corny, but it works. What do I know about it? Dude, I wrote the book on it. And then you give it to them. And it's hardcover because I believe books have to pass what I call the thump test. Because to be fair, I mean, this one is 400 pages. This one's even bigger. This one was not, because this was a sales tool. People say to me, oh, I got your new book. And, I'm going to read it. To be honest, I love for them to read it, but I don't care if they do or not. That's not the point of it. A book is a business card. A book is a credibility developer. A book gives you gravitas. I have your books. I'm reading your new one now, as you know, and I'm learning a lot from it. But the most important thing is that you send me one. I go, oh, look what David did. He wrote a new book. So how did I get it in their hands? I gave it to them. I sent it to them. I mailed it to them. It amazes me. And people like this, they come up with promotional materials, books, hats, water bottles, whatever it is. And then they don't want to give them out because they cost too much. And they have to decide if the potential client is worthy. I think on Seinfeld, or what's her name, Elaine would decide if her dates were sponge worthy, right? Which she used the contraceptive sponge because she only had so many of them. I think that's really a bad strategy. Instead, you print the books, you fill your garage with them, and then you give them away like candy.
So in the course of a sales conversation, they would come to you and you would send a book, or sometimes you would initially send a book as the first shot over the bow?
Of course, the answer is yes and yes.
Okay.
Sometimes it would be the way I would reach out to them. Sometimes it would be, I know you're considering an agency. We're not in the mix. And I wouldn't say you should put us in the mix. What I would say was, here's some good information you might want to use to make your decision.
Nice.
Well, none of the people they were talking to used any of the things that I was recommending because I created the language, birds flying over the wall. So then they would say, well, none of these people know how to do it. Why don't we call that guy who wrote the book? That's how it works.
For sure.
Any way you can get them into people's hands, you do it. And if I can give you a little tip for all the people paying attention, you'll notice that this book is full of sticky notes. Let's say I were to send you this book or this book. I want you to read it. But as we've said, you may or may not read it. However, you will read things that are of interest to you. So I went through the index. That's the great thing about having a publisher. You have what's called an index editor, and they create an index for you.
Yeah.
And then if I'm sending it to someone in the food service industry, let's say for a speaking gig or back then for a design thing, I will put a sticky at Burger King, at TCBY, at Kentucky Fried Chicken, at Joe's Stone Crab, and I'll say on a big sticky on the cover, hey, David, thought you might like to read this. There's a lot of information about your industry. So what do? You go to Burger, you're in the fast food business, you go to Burger King and be open in there. I've highlighted it and you'll read that. Then you go to the next one and you'll read that. And what happens? I become the expert in those different silos. And I've shown you. And more importantly, what do? You go to someone in your office and go, we're trying to compete with that Burger King program. Did you know that Burger King does this? And they pull the book out and they show it. Who wrote that? Oh, this guy, Bruce Turkel. I wonder if he could help us with this problem. It works really well.
I love that. So you're actually putting little Post-it flags in things that are particularly relevant to them or their industry.
I've got the little, just to prove the point, I've got the little Post-it flag pad right here.
Very nice.
The big one goes in the front. All the little ones mark the pages. I have very good handwriting. I'm a designer, so it's easy to read. And then I highlight the pages. Sometimes I'll add a little note and I'll fold it and I'll put it in there. Because books are tools, the way I see it. You should be writing in them, marking them up, dog-earing them. You can go back to them. Well, I do that for them. And so this one shows where all these things I want to talk about are, and I use that as my model for when I prepare one to send out. I've also made very easy to do. I took the index and I turned it into a spreadsheet. And then on that spreadsheet, I put the different silos. So for example, restaurants, I have all the restaurant names, but I don't need to remember what they are. I can just click on restaurants on the tab. And then everything I said about a restaurant, I can click on political candidates, and everything I said about political candidates. I can click on destinations because in my agency, we did work for Miami, for Puerto Rico, for Peru, for Guatemala. But I can click on destinations and I can see all the tourism work I did. And that way I can do it very quickly.
Yeah, brilliant. And it also keeps the restaurant CEO from getting bogged down. Oh, I just randomly opened the book because there's no Post-its in it. He works with airlines. I guess he's not our guy. Right. So you work with airlines, restaurants, travel destinations.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, let me ask you just a couple of chapter titles and a couple of concepts from the All About Them book. Your first chapter is Nobody's Happy. Tell us about Nobody's Happy, because that's a really clever twist on some big ideas.
Well, we have reached such a level of technological opportunity, financial opportunity, educational opportunity, that you would think that we would all walk around smiling. The example I use with people is, there's nothing that the King of England 400 years ago could do that you can't except have people executed. He could say, off with their head. And guess what? That would actually happen. But other than that, there's nothing he can do that you can't do. You have better food, better weather, because you have air conditioning and heating. You have mechanical transportation. The guy was sitting in a box behind a horse, right? We have all these different things. So you would think we would go around going, oh my God, look how great this is. Look how great that is. But we don't. We still find things to complain about. We still find things to bitch about. So if that's the case, and if you're looking to sell a better product or a better service or something, I think it's important to realize that as good as it is, people aren't going to say, oh my God, that's what I've been waiting for. Because again, if they did, they would be saying that already. The fact that you're wearing eyeglasses, think about if we were our age, I took mine off because I have nothing to read here, but if we were our age 600 years ago, we wouldn't be able to see. But do you ever go, hey, look how lucky I am? I have glasses. People go, no, can you believe I got to wear these damn glasses? But being a marketer, and you know this, it's not my job to correct those assumptions. It's not my job even to tell people, what are you complaining about? It's my job to understand them and to understand the motivation of them and look to see how I can make my clients' lives better because I have those understandings.
And I'm guessing also that because of Nobody's Happy, a big part of the sales process is changing that client's emotional temperature. It's not about give them the thing and the specs and the details and whatever. It's really about changing the way they feel about their problem, about their people, about their future, about their prospects.
I love that line, emotional temperature. I'm going to appropriate that. I'll give you credit the first few times I use it, and then it'll be mine.
Exactly.
But yeah, what I try to explain to people is that function, your ability to do your job, a device's ability to do whatever it was designed to do, is cost of entry. If you're an accountant and you can't do spreadsheets and read trial balances, guess what? You're not getting a job.
Right.
But just because you can doesn't mean you're getting the job either. Functional quality, functional ability, functional proficiency is cost of entry. It's table stakes. If you don't have those things, you are not in business. But just because you do doesn't mean you're in business either. If you're in Vegas and you sit down at a poker table, you have to ante up. If you don't ante up, they don't let you play. However, just because you do ante up doesn't mean they let you win. And it's the same thing here. Most of the functional attributes of what we do are intellectual, right? It's numbers, it's percentages, it's all those things that are critical to success, but do not accomplish success. They just give you the right to then be successful.
Right.
It's the emotional response that is what makes the things you do inviting to others. So if you're selling something, talking about what you, again, to use the accounting metaphor, if you're a CPA, talking about what you scored on your regulatory test means nothing to me. All I care about is that you are a CPA and you can do your job. You know the old joke. What do they call the person in medical school who gets 1 point above failing on their medical boards?
Doctor.
Doctor, right. You have to do that to be a doctor, but that doesn't mean you're a good doctor. My wife, who's a nurse practitioner and worked in CCU and ICU in the emergency room, she will tell you that good doctors get sued all the time. Nice doctors don't get sued. Most people judge the quality of medical care based on bedside manner, which may have nothing to do with the quality of the care you received. It's simply how you feel about the quality of care you received.
Totally. Well, last thing from All About Them, and then I definitely want to talk about Is That All There Is? Talk about what we sell versus what we exchange money for.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you found that in the book. That's a really simple concept that I have to repeat over and over and over until people get it. If I ask most people about their businesses, they will tell me about what they exchange for money. So, for example, a friend of mine years and years ago was sitting in an airplane and he sat next to Tom Monahan, the guy who started Domino's. Now, Tom Monahan has his own jets, but I think this was early on before he did. And my friend Bob said to Tom, when he figured out who he was, "Oh my God, Domino's is my favorite pizza." And Monahan said, "No, it's not." He said, "No, there's a little Italian place down the street that uses coal-fired ovens or buffalo mozzarella or their mother's sauce recipe." And Bob said, "Oh yeah, Di Napoli, they're my favorite pizza. I'm sorry." And Tom Monahan says, "Oh, no, don't worry. I'm not in the pizza business." What? He says, "I'm not in the pizza business." "You're not in the pizza business?" He goes, "No, I'm in it's 6:30. My wife and I just got home from work. The kids are hungry. We don't feel like cooking business. I'm in my friends came over to watch the game. There's no food in the house and my wife is pissed business."
30 minutes or less, right?
Well, and that's what he said. It's 30 minutes or it's free, because in more than 30 minutes, you can solve the problem another way. You can cook something. You can make some eggs or toast or whatever. You can pull something out of the freezer. You can go to another place. You could call Di Napoli or the local place, but they won't deliver for 45 minutes or an hour, and the kid will screw up the delivery. But in more than 30 minutes, you have other solutions. He said, "I am in the solution business." So I extrapolated that to mean what he exchanges for money is crust and sauce and cheese and a box and baking. But what he sells is problem solving. What he sells is not having my wife pissed at me. Patek Philippe. What do they exchange for money? Very expensive watches. Does a Patek Philippe, one of the best watches made, does it keep better time than a Rolex or than a Panerai or an Omega? For that matter, than a Swatch or your phone? Actually, your phone keeps better time because the time is perfect on your phone. But they don't sell watches. They exchange titanium, glass, and Swiss engineering for money. What do they sell? Their ads always show a very attractive parent with a beautiful child. They don't even show the watch. I mean, the guy's wearing it or the woman's wearing it, but they don't feature it. And the headline says, "You don't own a Patek Philippe. You simply take care of it for the next generation." So what are they selling? They're selling legacy. They're selling your accomplishments. They're selling how much your children love you. If you think about any car brand, you can describe what they do in one word, and it's not transportation. Jeep is rugged. Mercedes is status. BMW is performance. Toyota is durability. Ferrari is old men picking up young girls at nightclubs. They all are describable in something that's not function. Yeah. That's what you sell.
Well, when we stop selling, all of a sudden, we're probably asking ourselves the question, is that all there is? So talk about, is that all there is? The research, the findings, some of the big ahas that you had as you were kind of getting out of the business and starting this new chapter and this new adventure in your life. Talk about kind of how that came to be.
Okay, sure. 2000, I think 16-ish, we had offices in Latin America. We sold those. We sold a half interest first to an agency in Spain. Eventually, they bought the whole network that we had in Latin America. But my partner who ran that network, he continued to run it. So their idea was they were going to buy our agency. I had been doing it long enough. I was ready to do something else until I saw the way they managed those Latin American agencies, because I would have had to work for them for a few years to do my buyout. And I realized there's just not a chance I could work for these people. So I wound up selling my interest in the business to my partner. And I was then free to write more books, to do more consulting, and to do more speaking, which is what I love to do. As you know, we've talked about that. But I really didn't know what to do. And again, go back, we are who we are. What's that old saying? If the only tool you have is a hammer, every solution looks like a nail. Yeah. So what kind of hammer am I? I'm a marketing guy. What's the nail? Market research. So I went out and I did market research. I didn't realize that's what I was doing until actually someone pointed it out to me and I went, oh yeah, good point. But I spoke to like almost 50 people who had changed their lives, who had sold their business, had a liquidity event, or had bad stuff happen. The partner ripped them off in one case. One guy became addicted to drugs because of the pressures. One guy had he sold his business for tons of money and then had a horrible medical diagnosis. Anyways, it was all kinds of people. And from that, I wrote a book, and the book is titled, Is That All There Is? And it's all about people who look at their lives and say, now what? It's what I was going through. And that's what I found so many other people go through. But I didn't realize, I thought I was writing a book for 50 and 60 plus year olds. But as I did the interviews, the age kept getting lower and lower and lower. I sent the book to my, at the time, 26-year-old daughter. And she said to me, wow, Dad, she read it because Daddy wrote it, but she said, this is great. Why didn't you tell me this stuff? And I thought, well, I didn't really think this stuff mattered to you. She said, would you send me some books to send to my friends? So I did. And then I started getting notes from 25-year-olds. Oh my God, why didn't they teach me this stuff in college? So I realized that there was a real zeitgeist of people looking at their lives and saying, now what? And so that then became a whole new speaking career, a whole new consulting opportunity. And I've put together curriculums and strategic roundtables. I have one called CE only for CEOs, obviously, where we get together and talk about their businesses and their lives and what they're going to do. And a lot of the things that we used in the agency to figure out what our clients wanted, we can use the same tools to figure out what people want.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
So this is like the meaning of life, right? Because this, on the transactional level, we're talking about burnout. We're talking about, personal energy, things like that. I'm thinking on the global meaning level, we're talking about purpose. We're talking about passion. We're talking about contribution. We're talking about feeling a sense of belonging. Talk about some of the findings in those areas that through these interviews really just leapt out and kissed you on the lips.
So here's a test that y'all can do. The people who are watching and listening, you don't have to share this with anyone, so you can be completely open and honest. David, you don't have to blurt anything out. But I do suggest you write these things down so when you go back and look at them, you can't justify what you meant when you came up with it. And try to answer in one or two words. The question is, what do you want? Say to somebody, well, okay, you're not happy in your job, you're not happy in your life, or you want to make a change. What do you want? People generally answer with three different components. I want to be rich. Now, they could say, I want money. They could say, I want to be successful. There's lots of ways to say it, but essentially, I want to be rich. Okay. The second one people will say is, I want to be happy. They might say content. They might say, I want, like you said, a sense of purpose where I feel good about what I'm doing. But ultimately, I want to be happy. Good. And then the third one is fulfillment, purpose. usefulness. Again, you use a different word, but that's what people say. Okay. And my guess is if you're watching this podcast, you probably said one of those three things also. In fact, I pretty much never heard someone say something else that didn't fit into once they described it, that didn't actually fit into those three categories. So those are really clear markers. But then if you peel the onion back further, what does rich mean? It means very different things to different people. I have a client whose idea of being rich is reaching $1 billion. He wants to be a billionaire. He's well on his way. He's above 800 million. He already has a Falcon and a Gulfstream. So we would all say, oh my God, he's fabulously rich. But for whatever reason, his meaning of rich is he wants to be a billionaire. Other people say, I want private aviation. I want to own a Falcon right? Other people say, I'd like a vacation home. Other people say, I want to put my kids through college without debt. Other people say, I want to pay off my mortgage. Other people say, I want to pay the rent and get my kids prescription medicine, right? Rich is relative. It doesn't actually mean anything without qualifiers. Okay, so it takes a lot more navel gazing and understanding to figure out what does it mean to you. And the other two words are the same thing. What does happy mean? You want to walk around smiling all the time? Do you want to be giggling? Do you want to be like in an opium den? I mean, happy or content has very different meaning. We know plenty of people who do not have a good sense of humor, who don't smile a lot, who are perfectly happy. It's just where their happiness volume switches. And fulfillment, the same thing. Is your sense of purpose or fulfillment based on making the world a better place for human beings or for animals or the environment? Do you have a particularly powerful religious belief that you're given a scripted set of things you have to do and not do in order to meet that? I'm not suggesting it's good or bad or it works for me or not. That's not the point. But what does it mean to you? And what I find is most people can't explain that. So that's number one. Number two is if you say, well, what are you good at? What should you be doing? Most people will tell you what they're good at. But good at's not enough because you and I speak professionally. We're both good at it. Maybe we're better than good. But the point is we each know 500 people who are really good at it. And if it was only my client needs to fill 55 minutes on stage with someone talking about building their business, to be fair, David, I could go do it or you could go do it or lots of other people we know. And the client would be very happy and so would the audience, right? And if I was completely honest, I could watch you and go, damn, he's good. I wouldn't have to think, oh, I would have been better because I've seen you and I know how good you are. That doesn't give us a big competitive advantage. It only back to table stakes. So you have to stop focusing on what you're good at and you have to ladder up a level and focusing on what you're uniquely qualified to do. And usually those things are not based on skill sets. They're based on emotional drivers and combinations of things. So for example, I can draw and I can play music and I can write and I can speak. There's people who are much better musicians than I am. I am not a virtuoso. There's better artists or illustrators than me. There's certainly better writers. And I'm sorry to admit there's better speakers than me. But there's nobody who can do all four of those things and come up with creative ideas like I can. That's called skill stacking. And when those skills get stacked together, all of a sudden, I have an enormous competitive advantage because someone like you who does things very similar to me, you do it a very different way. And so I could present those things while I play music on stage and I draw pictures and I do this. And you would say, I can't do that. But then you would talk about what you do and I would go, oh yeah, I don't do that. The idea is to understand that for ourselves. What are we uniquely qualified to do? How do those stack together, becoming our superpowers? And then how does that tell us what I call your HBU? What is your highest and best use? I love Randy Gage's line that if you don't hire a personal assistant, you are a personal assistant. My HBU is not buying my own airplane tickets. Scott, my personal assistant, is amazing at it. He loves it. He likes to do all the details and figure out, I can use your points, but I'm not going to use your American Airlines points. I'm going to use your American Express points. But what I'm going to do, right? Whereas it's like, oh, just shoot me. I just want to get on the plane and get off, right? So you find someone who has those HBUs that are different than yours, and then you create the yin and yang, and you do it together.
There is so much good stuff in there. I love that the concept of it's not just one skill or one interest or one ability. It is the overlap, right? The magic is in the combination. You call it stacking, but I love that, combining your talents. It's like you're cooking a dish. Yes, we all have the same ingredients, but the way that one chef puts together those ingredients, and maybe they have other ingredients, different ingredients than a different chef, that's what makes it a gourmet meal.
That's right. I can tell you a story. My wife's cousin is Jimmy Buffett's business manager. He runs the concert tours, the T-shirt operation, all the different vendors. He does all of that. He has nothing to do with the music. But every time Buffett plays in South Florida, Henry will invite us. We'll get tickets. We get to sit up front. And a couple of times we've actually gotten to go in the back and have dinner with the band before they go on stage, because my wife and her cousin don't see each other very often. They love each other, so they spend time together. So one time, Jimmy Buffett's back there. I'm a musician. I know people who played with him. I'm certainly not on his level, but I start chatting with him about music. We had a lovely chat, and something comes up he asked something about the instruments I play, and I told him, and I don't know how it came up, but I said, yeah, but Mom, I play guitar in our band, but I play rhythm guitar. I'm not that good I mostly play harmonica. I'm not that good of a guitar player. He goes, you see Mac McAnally over there? He says, that's my lead guitar player. Mac McAnally is a virtuoso. He says, I'm not that good of a guitar player either. I mean, I can't play like Mac McAnally. That guy can play anything. He says, and I sing on stage. He goes, I ain't a great singer. You see those three women they're eating over there? Those two, they've both been on Broadway. They do musical theater. They can sing anything. And the third one, that pretty woman over there, he says, she's opera trained. She has a 7-octave range. She can sing circles around me. He goes, I ain't that good of a guitar player. And be honest, I'm not that good of a singer, but I'm the best goddamn Jimmy Buffett on the planet. And that's, to your point, of the chefs, how he uses the ingredients differently. I can play a C chord. He can play a C chord. McAnally can play a C chord, but no one plays it, puts it together like Buffett does. And it's the skill stacking of the tropical aspiration and the songs and the voice and the fact that he flies a seaplane and all those things combined that create this incredibly powerful business empire.
Wow. Yes, yes, yes. Well, as we're wrapping up, I've got 2 final questions for you. The final question is, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Bruce Turkel brilliance? Before that, though, if people were to take one central theme or one central concept away from our chat today, which was far-ranging, deep and wide, what would you hope the one central takeaway for folks should be?
David, have I told you lately that I love you? You just tee me up so beautifully. Thank you for that. Good brands make people feel good, but great brands make people feel good about themselves. When you look to build your business, your brand, your activities, your relationships, your romances, your family connections, think not about making the people, your customers, your love interests, your children, not just about making them feel good, but how can you make them feel good about themselves? If you do that, the entire paradigm shifts, because what happens is if they feel better about themselves when they're with you or using your products or your services, they want more of that. Really, what they want is more of themselves. Remember, they want those 3 things: to be rich, to be happy, to be fulfilled. That's what makes people feel good. Whatever their interpretation of it is, you have no control over. But you do know how to make people feel good. By the way, you've done it because you did the research. You read the books. That makes me feel good. I've been on a lot of these interviews where they're reading stuff out of the table of contents because, to be fair, they didn't read the book. But you clearly did. And you make me feel good about myself because you ask incisive questions that, as I say, tee me up to be better at what I do. The interviewee has to be good, but it's the interviewer, whether it's Oprah or Terry Gross or you, that allows the interviewee to feel good about themselves. And you do that, and you have done that. So thank you. How to get in touch with me is easy. Everything I do is my name. My email address is my name. It's bruce@bruceturkel.com. My website is my name. It's bruceturkel.com. I have other things, but You go there, you got my phone number, you have my email address, all of my social media is under Bruce Turkel. I'm very easy to find. I write a blog post about this stuff. It goes out every single week. I haven't missed a deadline since 2007. So I'm constantly putting out information, ideas. Hey, did you ever think of looking at it this way? Oh, I just saw this. Here's how you can utilize it. If you want it, you can go on the website and you can sign up for it, or you can send me an email and Scott will put you on the list. But it's just my name, Bruce, Bruce, Turkel, Turkel. It's all there.
Awesome. And all of those links will be under the show notes, under this episode. They'll be in the show notes, not going to be under the show notes. They're going to be under this episode in the notes at thesellingshow.com.
And put links to the books if you would. The books are on Amazon. So if you put links,
we're going to link up the books for sure. Of course, we're going to link up the books. Are you kidding me? Everyone needs to read all the books. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read the Brand Value book. I love the whole methodology of the book is a sales tool for your services. And there's so many gold nuggets that you dropped here, Bruce. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We have to have you back because the well runs deep with you, my friend. I appreciate you.
All right, David, this was a wonderful experience. Thank you very much.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.